Hello everyone, today I'll be reviewing Dr. Strangelove. So Dr. Strangelove came out in 1964 and stars Peter Sellers and George C. Scott, and it was directed by Stanley Kubrick. This film is basically a satirical take on the Cold War, which was between the Soviet Union and the United States. And this film really just makes fun of the whole situation between the US and the Soviet Union during the Cold War, when obviously a time when these two countries, they weren't sure who was going to bomb each other or what exactly was going to happen, because both these countries had these big nuclear weapons, and there was a lot of fear among many people during this time that, one of these countries was essentially going to do some serious damage or potentially end the world. This was what it was like. And the film basically just makes fun of the whole paranoia around this time. Really, the main actor in this film is Peter Sellers, and in fact he plays 3 different characters in this film, and all of them are actually completely different. That, in fact, the first time I watched it, it did take me a while before I realised Peter Sellers was actually playing these 3 different characters. So the first type of character he plays is this British RAF captain, and is almost a sort of similar character to Alec Guinness in The Bridge on the River Kwai. So he's very British, is very posh, and just an excellent character altogether, really. And then we have his 2 other characters, and one of his other characters is the President of the United States. And when he's playing the President, he's essentially balding and he wears glasses, so it looks completely different. And then his 3rd character is actually the character called Dr. Strangelove, who is a German scientist who used to be a Nazi and is in a wheelchair. And these 2 characters are completely different, and essentially it's amazing how Peter Sellers was able to play these 3 different characters. There's also another character played by Sterling Hayden, and he plays an American brigadier captain, and he is very paranoid about the Russians and the Soviet Union and the communists, and he thinks that the Soviet Union, that there is a conspiracy that they are trying to poison the water supply of the United States and essentially harm their bodily fluids. And in actual fact, this was a real conspiracy theory that lots of people had in the 50s and 60s, which I didn't realise at first. But this film basically makes fun of it, with Sterling Hayden's character being really paranoid about it. And what he does, he sends some planes with some weapons across to the Soviet Union in order to bomb them. So then Peter Sellers' President character, he then calls up the head of the Soviet Union, and we get these really funny scenes when they're talking backwards and forward on the phone, trying to arrange a way to call off all these planes going forward. But Sterling Hayden's character has actually locked himself away and cut off all contact with everyone, so he can't cancel them, and he's the only one who knows the code how to call back these planes and stop them from dropping the bombs. And then we get all this paranoia in this big room where there's this massive table with all these characters speaking, and this room is known as the war room, and everyone is trying to debate about what to do and how to stop this from escalating out of control. Then it later turns out that it is possible that perhaps the Soviet Union does own this bomb known as the Doomsday Machine, which can be activated and completely destroy the world. I would like to say that Stanley Kubrick is possibly my favourite film director of all time, and it really is amazing when you think that of all the other films he's done, like 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Shining, A Clockwork Orange, Full Metal Jacket, when you look at something like this, Dr. Strangelove, it really is an entirely different film to all those other films Kubrick has directed, because it's a comedy film, and as far as I know, Kubrick didn't normally do comedy films, so it does seem a very unusual thing for Kubrick to do when making this film. There are so many funny lines in this film. Really, the humour in this film is very satirical. It's mostly in the dialogue, what the characters say. One of the best quotes is, "Gentlemen, you cannot fight in here, this is the war room." I think that's probably the most famous quote in the film. George C. Scott is also very good in this film. He plays General Buck Turgidson, who's essentially trying to sort out what is going on and try to arrange to stop these planes from attacking. But at the same time, he also really doesn't like the Russians and always very suspicious of them and what is going on, and he thinks there is some kind of conspiracy and thinks that the Soviets are lying to the Americans. But really, with the humour in this film, it's very clever, and unfortunately I do think, looking back at it now, considering the film is over 50 years old and is, set during the Cold War, I think now a lot of people watching it, a lot of the jokes will completely go over their head. And I have to admit, I probably didn't get all the jokes in this film. There were certain scenes I could tell were maybe supposed to be funny, but I didn't always find particularly amusing. There were a few very funny scenes in this film. I really like the interaction between the president and the head of the Soviet Union on the telephone with their chit-chat back and forth. That's a very amusing scene in what is supposed to be a very, very serious issue. They almost treat it just like a regular conversation. If I am to be completely honest, this is actually probably my least favourite Stanley Kubrick film which I've seen, and I still haven't seen all of Stanley Kubrick films. I haven't seen ones like Barry Lyndon and Paths of Glory, but out of all the other Kubrick films I've seen, this is probably my least favourite. Now, I'm not saying that I dislike this film, I just find that generally with comedy films, I think for me to really appreciate a comedy film, I have to like all of it. And there were a few bits in this film that I did start to lose attention. I did find maybe a little bit boring. We do get these scenes when they are on a plane with the pilot and the people on board ready to launch the bombs and ready to attack the Russians. In those scenes, the film maybe did slow down a little bit, though. I do like the intro, the way the film is introduced, and the ending of the film is absolutely brilliant. Very memorable ending scene. So if you're going to see this, make sure you watch to the end and you'll know what I mean. But overall, I can certainly understand why this is considered one of the greatest comedy films of all time, and it's just fantastic to think that Stanley Kubrick, of all directors, made this. In fact, the American Film Institute actually named it number 3 on the list of the 100 greatest comedy films of all time, and I can understand that. But it's one of those films that, like all comedy films, not everybody is going to find this film funny, and particularly when it's set around the Cold War, a lot of the jokes a lot of people won't get nowadays, but you have to put it into context, and it's one of those films that when put into context, it really is a very funny film. And if you're educated and you understand about the Cold War and the conflict between the Americans and Soviet Union, then you will definitely have lots to laugh at in this film, and you definitely should be able to have fun with it. So overall, I'm going to give Dr. Strangelove a rating of 8 out of 10. Definitely check it out if you like classic comedy films, although don't expect to laugh at everything because some of the jokes might go over your head like they did with me. I didn't particularly get all the jokes, but I found it an entertaining film and definitely worth a watch. So there we go. So that is my review of Dr. Strangelove. So what do you guys think? Have you seen Dr. Strangelove? Would you like to see it? Please let me know what you think down in the comments section. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.